Good morning, everyone. My name is Justin Gamage. I'm the Industry Liaison Manager at Ontario Tech University, and I'm pleased to host you here this morning, the third day of our third annual Future of Transportation and Mobility series that we are doing in partnership with the Hamilton Regional Technology Development Site. This series is tied to the supply chain and really looking at autonomous goods and services movement. Yesterday, we had a great discussion on the technologies that are really critical enablers to allowing this transition to happen. And today, we're going to talk a little bit more about, are we ready, and what the readiness levels are with municipalities and with the other partners that are going to be working in this space. Before we get into those discussions, I want to provide an introduction to Shireen Abdelhamid, who is the technical advisor for the Automotive and Mobility Innovation Group at the Autonomous Vehicle Innovation Network at the Ontario Centre of Innovation. So Shireen, over to you.
Thank you, Justin. Good morning, everyone. My name is Shireen Abdelhamid, and it's my pleasure on behalf of AVEN to welcome you all to the third day of the third annual Future of Transportation and Mobility Series event, organized by two of our regional technology development sites, the Durham Region RTDS and the Hamilton RTDS. This year, the conference theme is Autonomous Goods Movement and Service Movement, which I'd like to thank the organizers for choosing that, because it's a very hot and interesting topic these days, especially with COVID-19 and the increasing demand for contactless delivery. So we see a lot of fascinating developments happening in autonomous goods movement from first mile to last mile. We see the hype of autonomous trucks, drone delivery, and the sidewalk delivery robots. And it's not only about delivery. A lot is happening in the entire supply chain industry, thanks to technologies in AI, Internet of Things, and data analytics. So to learn more about the future of goods movement, I encourage you all to participate in the event today and to also check out our AVEN Specialized report that we published in September 2020. This report talks about leading the future of goods movement, and we discuss in it the different transformations and opportunities that we are seeing in all industries related to goods movement, including logistics, freight, trucking, warehousing, and last mile delivery. And you can access this report on our website, avenhub.ca, under Insights, and I will also share the link with you in the chat box here shortly. And please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. So thank you for having me today, and I wish you all a very nice day. Back to you, Justin.
Thank you, Shireen. And it's always great to hear from you and all the partners we have with the AVEN team. And I look forward to hearing what we're going to be talking about today. Before we get into the talks, I want to share with you a little bit of housekeeping items. First and foremost, I want to let you know who this event's been presented by, and it's presented by Innovation Factory Center for Integrated Transportation and Mobility, Ontario Tech University, which I'm a part of, Spark Center, Durham College, and the Autonomous Vehicle Innovation Network, which Shireen is obviously a part of. But I'd be remiss to not send out a thank you to all the people that are responsible for making this event go off without a hitch, that are working behind the scenes. So thank you, Kaylee, Melissa, Isabella, Paula, and Jennifer for making this happen so smoothly and without a hitch. All of the presentations will be taking place here on the main stage. So make sure you stay here and listen in. And if you have any comments or questions throughout the event, please leave them in the stage chat box, and we'll make sure we get them to you. And the stage chat box is right there on the right-hand side of your screen. All the information for the event, including the speakers' bios, is available on the website for this event. If you've been able to sign up for this event, you obviously know where that website is. So please do check back there, and you can get the additional information. And I also want to mention that this event is being live streamed as well, courtesy of Ciclano. So a number of people have been checking this out over the last couple of days, and it's working out quite well as well. And all these events are being recorded. So if you did miss an event or miss a talk yesterday or the day before, please do go back to the website once again, and you can basically relive or replay the events that have happened over the last couple of days. So without further ado, I want to introduce the first talk, and it's going to be an IBI keynote, which is led by Deepak Darda, who's a Global Director Innovation for the IBI Group. and Bruce Morey, who's the Director and Senior Practice Lead for Transportation Planning at the IBI Group. So over to you, Deepak and Bruce.
Well, good morning.
Good morning,
everyone. Thank you, Justin. Really excited to be here. So before, I'll just start sharing my screen, and then Bruce, maybe we can turn off our cameras, and then we'll go live.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties here. Just 1 sec. Okay, can everyone see my screen? Justin, can you see my screen? Hello?
I can see your screen, Deepak.
Okay, thank you. So before we get started, let me start with a question. How many of you will feel really comfortable when I tell you that soon you'll be sharing the road or a sidewalk with a freight vehicle which is unmanned, or a UPS Wemo vehicle, again unmanned, which is plying on our city roads, or even this FedEx delivery robot, or the small Jeffrey that was spotted in Toronto roads in late 2019. I'm sure as all these pictures have painted different pictures in your own mind, the same way our cities will have to start imagining the future and thinking about how they will embrace and adapt to this new innovation. Yes, I think autonomous vehicles are here, but are we ready? So today, me and my colleague Bruce, we are going to touch upon this interesting topic and share with you some of our own experiences through the work that we have been doing with cities in transportation planning. So there has been a lot of talks about CAV, and one of the things that we all feel with the widespread use of CAV, there will be a massive impact that is going to happen on our roads. They are going to make our roads more safer. They can reduce emissions and, in fact, increase the productivity. In fact, it is estimated that the traffic deaths can reduce by almost 90%. If you look at the data from US Department of Transportation of 2017, almost 37,000 deaths happened due to traffic. And out of those 37,000 deaths, 94% of that was because of human error. 94%. So again, if we introduce CAVs, that's going to have a huge impact, like a huge societal impact, where we can save thousands and thousands of lives. CAVs can help us in dropping of emissions by almost 60%. Our travel times can reduce by almost 40%. And to top it all, there can be 500% increase in our lane capacity. 500%. Again, if we really think about it, even if it is 200%, it will be huge. What it means is if we have to build new infrastructure, it will become much, much more cost effective. By using CAVs, we may only need 1/5 of the capital budgets that we need today. And it's not just the capital budgets, it's the ongoing operations and maintenance costs or the life cycle costs for that infrastructure that goes with it. So obviously all this data definitely points that CAVs is one of the biggest opportunities that we have today. And that's where our cities have to really get prepared to embrace this technology and start adopting it. The same is actually highlighted by the investments that are happening in this sector. Like, these are just some of the investments, the huge investments that are happening in the mobility sector. E-hailing definitely leads the pack, but there are huge investments after e-hailing which are happening in the CAV market. And the interesting thing here to note is a lot of these investments are happening from tech companies. It's happening from companies like Alphabet, the parent of Google, Microsoft, or Amazon, and not necessarily just from the traditional automobile companies. So it just shows how much of this space is really active by different technology companies, and a lot of money is getting pumped into this. Now, as much as we think, and all of us are looking forward to CAVs from a passenger vehicle perspective, but we feel the initial thirst is going to happen on the freight side. So let's understand a little bit on the freight side. Like today, between Canada and US, there is about $800 billion of freight revenues that goes annually that is there. Amazon, which was just like an e-commerce company, is now a logistics company. 5% of its business is in logistics, and Amazon expects this to grow by 15% by 2025. And that just shows that the sheer increase that they are expecting that is going to happen for the e-commerce. And on the other side, we have a shortfall for truckers. In Canada, there are about 25,000 truckers less. US is estimated to be around 150,000 truckers less. So again, there is a interesting push and pull between demand and supply that is happening here, where the demand is exceeding the supply that we have. And that's a gap that really we feel the CAV can really help us. They can fill up the gap, they can effectively help to reduce the cost, and they can definitely help us for better utilization of our trucks or the infrastructures. Another interesting thing on the freight is, and this is again related to what is happening with freight now, the B2B freight side of the logistics is highly profitable, but the B2C is something that is not very profitable, and in some cases it is even a loss leader. But the growth really is happening on the B2C side. So the companies cannot ignore B2C. They really have to put in money and they really have to service the B2C, but that's not very profitable. So again, from a lot of these freight logistics companies, there is this push that is coming where they cannot leave the B2C market, but at the same time, from a financial perspective, it does not make sense them to expand on B2C. And that is where, again, as we saw in some of those pictures earlier, like FedEx experimenting with delivery robots or that mini Jeffrey, those will become more and more important to actually get the deliveries done within our city, because the last mile deliveries is where the major cost is incurred. So I think with that, I would just like to jump into, with CAVs coming into our cities, what are the impacts or what are the opportunities that are there, and are our cities ready for it? And we'd like to look at it from three lens perspective. The first one is a technology opportunity. What does that mean? Changing landscape, and from an operations perspective. So let's first understand from a technology perspective. One of the interesting things, again, that happened in 2020, and again, just because of COVID, suddenly cities realized the importance of curbside. The curbside was actually used for pickups and deliveries. It was used for dropping off people. It was used for even restaurants. And with that, it became a very scarce commodity. And the cities actually didn't have any mechanism to actually actively manage the curbside. One of the challenges the cities have is they don't even have the data, like a digital data of the curbside. If a CAV comes into the city and they have to do a delivery at a curbside, this is what they see. You cannot determine upfront where is a parking lot or where is the freight delivery place in the city. They have to come, they have to figure out the parking sign, how much they have to pay, how much time they can park, etc. And this can only be figured out once you reach there. So there is no digital layer that exists today of the curbside. And without the curbside data, you cannot actually manage the curb or the deliveries that can happen on the curbside. So that becomes a really, really important underlying infrastructure that the cities would have to look at. So the cities would have to start looking at a digital city layer, a layer that shows the road, it shows the curbside, it interfaces with the signaling systems, and all that ties with CAVs together. And that is something that needs to start happening in our cities. But the good news is there are solutions like Curb IQ, which are now popping up. This was, in fact, a hackathon idea that happened in our own company, IBI, last year, where the people suggested this as an idea to digitize the curb and digitize and create a digital layer of the city. And now this has been implemented, and I'm pleased to share that some of the cities are now working with this team Curb IQ to create this digital layer of the city. And some of these things, as they get implemented, will really enable the deployment of CAVs or us to be able to dynamically change or monitor our curbside from a delivery perspective. So this is an area where the cities would have to step up. There are other areas where if you feel the CAVs can really contribute well to the city, like CAVs themselves can be a sensor. They can be a sensor where they can give huge amount of data about the traffic conditions in the city, in fact, conditions about the pavement in the city, or weather conditions. Like we as IBI, we were involved with a startup called Weather Telematics, where the vehicles were used to collect weather data, and that was used to create a hyper-local weather data. So the same way the CAVs, the network of CAVs can be used to create a hyper-local data set, whether it's traffic, payment conditions, or weather, and it can be then further used in real time to optimize the traffic networks. Or in future, the cities can really use that data from CAVs for better planning of the city networks. So this is an opportunity that the cities can actually take with CAVs to really for the betterment of the networks that are there in the city. Then with that, let's also understand the changing landscape. Again, one of the things that happened because of COVID-19, a lot of people are actually moving away from major cities. Like where we work, live, or play, that is all going a major change. Like today, all of us are actually virtually attending this conference. Like last year, or before COVID, we all would be in offices, we will be actually meeting in person, or these conferences will be actually in person, versus everything has now changed to virtual. So that's a new phenomena that has started happening. But at the same time, what COVID has done is a lot of people are migrating from larger cities to suburbs or smaller cities. And with them moving away from the larger cities to smaller cities or suburb, it essentially means that the entire transportation network will need to change. We as planners, we have been actually pushing the cities to be made more compact. But with this, it's going to promote more of urban sprawl, and the need of infrastructure is going to go much, much more. And this is something, again, we have to keep in mind, and this will have an impact on the future technology, like again, the deployment. Maybe we need much, much more network for freight deliveries if the population is more spread out. So these are certain things, again, to watch out for as we are thinking about deployment of new mobility options. Another area to, again, look for is there are other interesting technologies that are coming into play. And this is one of them, like 3D printing. And I'm really fascinated. This is, again, another very interesting technology, which will have a huge impact. Like studies say that almost 25% of freight will actually reduce because of 3D printing. And this is true, because if you really look at this diagram, for any equipment or any device or anything material that is actually used by an end user, it is manufactured, it is assembled, it is distributed, taken to the warehouse, then it comes for retailing. And at each and every step, there is some component of freight that is involved. But like with 3D printing, all that is bypassed because the end user essentially prints that at their own location. In fact, we have now seen a school actually getting 3D printed in Madagascar, which will be just coming online. So it just cuts across the entire freight that was required. So technologies like 3D printing are going to have impact on the need of freight, and in that sense, it will actually have impacts on the CAVs that we are thinking from a freight perspective. And lastly, let's touch upon operations. And in operations, let me just show you a video of Jeffrey, like that I showed you earlier in my presentation. The small robot that was seen on Toronto Road, just to give you a glimpse of what will happen on our roads. So this is Jeffrey. It's essentially getting out of its warehouse. It's going to the restaurant where it got an order to pick up the order. It picks up the order. And now you will see Jeffrey navigating people and even crossing a signal to actually deliver this package to the end user.
Jeffrey, give me my food. Yes!
So, isn't this amazing, like as to how this delivery robot picked up a package and actually delivered it to the end user, navigating everything that is there on our city roads. That's really amazing. But imagine if you are one of those persons who are there on the sidewalks and there are like 20 Jeffreys that you spot on a sidewalk. How will you deal with it? How will you react to that? And these are some things that our cities will have to really solve. Just like we have dedicated bike lanes, are we going to have like dedicated lanes for some of these delivery vehicles or freight vehicles? Are we going to have that? Are we going to have freight corridors? And these are some things that our cities have to start thinking about as we are thinking about planning of the future networks of our cities. Another area to really think about, let's say we solve the curbside issue, we even come up with freight corridors or a solution to that. Another phenomena to keep in mind, it is in many cities, like for example, in case of Toronto, a lot of delivery centers are actually in neighboring cities like Brampton. So a lot of deliveries actually happen from Brampton into Toronto. So if Toronto allows deliveries using CAVs on the curbside and Brampton does not allow it, or some of the neighboring cities don't allow it, then that becomes a huge issue. So all the cities, neighboring cities, will have to come up with consistent policies and processes so that some of these technological innovations can be really supported. So we really need to look at how policy and processes are put up at different levels. It's federal, provincial, as well as city levels to really help to push forward these innovations. And I think with this, I wanted to leave you with some final thoughts. Like no innovations actually happens in vacuum, right? We must always consider all these deployments like as an intersection between themselves as well as with society. And we need to understand the benefit and the losses that we'll have, like the trade-offs that will happen because of some of these innovations. Like, for example, all of us are aware AI is such a powerful technology, but again, we have to be careful on areas where we use AI and where we limit the use of AI. So there will always be a balance that we'll have to actually think about. So as I said earlier, where we live, work, or play is undergoing a huge change. There is a push that is right now happening where people migrating towards smaller cities or suburbs. And with technologies like CAVs, it will actually promote urban sprawls to happen. But we as planners have been always pushing for making our cities more compact. And these are some things, there will be always the push and pull that will happen. But we have to keep some of these overall points in mind about what does it mean for us to create urban sprawls. Like, we'll need to create more infrastructure to service that as we design the future of our cities. Another thing that will happen because of CAVs is like, one of the good things that will actually happen with CAVs is if robo taxis really pick up, like, we may not be even required to pay parking, or there may not be any parking tickets. But on the flip side, it's going to have a huge impact on revenues of cities. Parking constitutes a major revenue source for cities. And with the reduction of fuel surcharges that comes to the government because of CAVs, the cities would have to start looking into alternate sources of revenues. And that is something, again, we all have to think about. And lastly, there are a lot of interesting technologies that are also taking shape at the same time. It's 5G, 3D printing, cybersecurity, quantum computing. All these have different impacts, and they will form a new equilibrium. And we'll have to essentially understand how all these impacts as we look into the deployment of CAVs and actually better utilize these technologies for us. I think with that, I'll hand it over to Bruce to actually share with us some of the experiences, our own experiences with respect to cities as we are planning the cities for the future. Bruce?
Thank you, Deepak. And so, as Deepak mentioned, I do work for the public sector, so I'll bring a municipal planning perspective of how cities are preparing for CAVs and the municipal role and its potential emerging role in this area. If you go to the next slide, Deepak. Previously mentioned that there's a lot of great benefits with the increased capacity to accommodate population growth in cities, reduce traffic congestion, etc. Great opportunities, exciting stuff. But again, our problem is technology can get too far ahead of our public planning and regulation, and therefore there could be some unintended negative consequences. And we all know about the recent examples with Uber disrupting the taxi industry, e-scooters that have raised concern in various cities about sidewalk safety, urban clutter, with dockless e-scooters being left on sidewalks as shown in the picture. But when we're talking about AVs, the implications are much greater because it affects transportation and building infrastructure and land use. And these take decades to change and really define our cities. And it's very hard to undo our mistakes. So while the technology is here, we know AVs are coming. So it's really important that we plan our cities for this future. And going to the next slide, again, the benefits, more efficient use of corridors, congestion, all that good stuff. But it also, from a public policy point of view, it provides mobility to all people of all ages and abilities. So people who can't drive or don't have access to a car, they now have mobility options available to them. And AV good delivery helps everyone. And this can all contribute to a healthy and prosperous city if we implement things right. But going to the next slide, as Deepak had already mentioned, there can be disbenefits, and left unchecked, it can lead to negative impacts in how our cities evolve. And there's a wide range of opinions on how AVs will help or hinder our current traffic problems, for instance, as the increased amount of travel on the roads due to the added convenience and availability to people is greater than the increase in vehicle capacity on roadways that AVs would provide. So we're kind of worse off. And work that others have done and I've done, so that it probably gets worse with more traffic congestions and bigger problems without public interventions. The big concerns from a city planning perspective is that AVs will promote sprawl as as Deepak had mentioned, and those negative impacts, and that transit, on-demand transit offered by private companies can undermine the public systems and reduce public transit accessibility that hurts lower-income people and priority neighborhoods. So moving on to how we align private and public sector goals. Again, any good private sector business, including technology providers, are motivated by profit and will innovate within the rules to maximize it. And so with respect to AVs, the public sector is still in its infancy in terms of policies, guidelines, and regulations to guide the future implementation of AVs. So at this point, it's important to ensure AV providers are aligned with the broader city building objectives that can result in some win-win situations and fulfill the future vision city planners have for kind of the sustainable, healthy, prosperous 15-minute cities that we're planning for. Going on to the next slide. Freight and goods, as noted, are expected to be the earliest public implementation of autonomous vehicles. They're lower risk than passenger transport, and again, it already exists in many points in the freight supply chain. And going on to the next slide, just some examples of autonomous freight delivery, AVs and drones, and also truck platooning, sidewalk delivery robots are on the near-term horizon. So let's go on to transportation planning. And I'll briefly cover the next few slides what municipalities are doing and can do to prepare for AVs in the future. And looking at transportation master plans, which I'm very much involved with, cities prepare for, if you can move to the next slide, Deepak. Cities are preparing for future in transportation through transportation master plans that look and plan for about 25 years in the future. So we're looking at 2051 right now, and define the city's transportation infrastructure, the roads, transit, rapid transit. We need to build services, programs, policies to allow the cities to kind of grow and prosper. And as noted before, the visions include vibrant, people-oriented cities, multimodal, reducing sprawl, etc. So where does urban freight fit in there? If we can move to the next slide. Fortunately, municipalities are still really playing catch up on urban goods move in general, let alone with AVs, transportation master plans that have been done, and I've done some 25 of them, many of them currently, and the focus has been on sustainable transportation, rapid transit, public transit, walking, cycling, and that has a lot of strong citizen support, a lot of political support. Trucks have that negative impression still. It's being dirty, dangerous, and not safe for our children. And but the need to really change that perspective of urban freight is really critical to the economy. And a healthy, vibrant, prosperous city can't be done without effective urban freight, and autonomous vehicles can be a very key part of that plan. So when we look at planning in the next slide, kind of the considerations that municipalities look at and have guidelines and policies for include kind of the land use planning, and we know AVs could have a big impact on layout and where jobs are and where you live and how far you can go. It's street design, as noted before, and again, these are covered in transportation master plans. The next slide, complete streets, is kind of one of the key areas that's getting a lot of attention right now in city planning and transportation master plans. And complete streets are just designing streets for people of all ages and abilities, and therefore they're all the various users, be it road, vehicle, pedestrian, cyclists, goods are reflected in space needs and cross sections and standards. But again, unfortunately, goods movement is hardly recognized in any of the major Canadian cities, let alone getting towards AV and goods delivery. And again, the catch-up is really focusing on cycling and pedestrian movements and transforming our streets from auto focus to people focus. Again, catching up from the roads we built 40, 50 years ago. Now it's time for transformation, but we could miss that next transformation to really accommodate AVs to the best we can. So onto our challenges in the next slide. Our problem is investments in public transportation infrastructure and private buildings is needed to facilitate efficient AV goods delivery. But the life cycle change infrastructure and buildings, it's long. It takes decades. It's often, and once it's in place, it's often typically difficult or expensive to retrofit later. So it's important to get it right earlier than later. And you won't get the real benefits of AVs at a city level until you reach a certain critical mass. So we need the investment early without the real benefits of critical mass. And investing too early with uncertainty can lead to potential throwaway costs. And with technology changing so quickly, it's really hard to establish policy guidelines and standards right now. So if you can protect for AVs when you're constructing or building a roadway or a new building, the cost is low, but you need to know what you're designing for so you can future-proof your investments. So while the technology is here, engineers, architects don't know what to design for. CVs are coming. It's our best interest to be prepared and take advantage of its potential and reduce future costs. So going into the last slide, our second penultimate slide, how can cities prepare for AV goods movements? Municipalities need to take on a strategic role in the deployment of AVs to achieve city goals for a sustainable future. And we need to come up with a real vision of how AVs are part of an integrated and sustainable transportation system. Municipalities need to be informed, but also be informed by taking an active role in CFA rollouts so that their policy objectives can be met. Trials, developing certainties, partnerships, again, a way to do that. Formally adopting a task force. Again, the problem with CAVs is that it cross-cuts so many different departments with the municipalities and government that there's no real true champion. So perhaps task force that has direct reporting to council to make sure things get moved on well for the future. Cities can also take responsibility for the enabling systems to control its assets and allow providers to integrate with it, again, keeping a sense of public interest control. Moving good consultant, if I didn't recommend further study, and this can include study and research to understand the AV impacts on land use and to establish some guidelines there. Some standards on street design that particularly addresses AVs and policies to optimize the curve. We can do, the technology is there, we can do so much, but how do we allocate time, space? That there's a lot of big policy discussion there. We need standards for loading and unloading areas, both within buildings, smart buildings, and in public areas and high demand areas. There are more questions than answers right now, but now is the best time to start the discussion. Thank you, everyone. And back to you, Deepak.
Well, thank you, Bruce. I think with that, I and Bruce will be happy to take any questions that are there from the audience, and I think you guys can type your questions, and the organizers will be able to send it across to them to us.
Okay, so we've got a bunch of questions in the chat, and maybe I'll start with the first one. Maybe Deepak, if you want to hit it. A lot of really interesting points. Have you seen any examples of communities working to educate the public on what is coming with AVs? Deepak, do you have any kind of good examples? I may chime in with a few.
Sorry, which question are you referring to, Bruce?
The top one. So in terms of what examples of, and there has been some public consultations. I wouldn't say a whole lot of examples. Again, with the transportation master plans that I'm involved with, there's a lot of public consultation, of which AVs gets a very small part of the discussion. Our recent work with the City of Waterloo with their transportation master plan, again, very progressive, had some specific papers and stakeholder discussions on that, and some coverage within our recommendations, and that includes some of the recommendations that I spoke about in the last few slides. There have been, again, various pilot projects going on, not so much on the good side that I'm aware of. That includes community education.
Yeah, again, I think from what right now, my involvement has been concerned. I think we have been more talking at an agency level or with developers. Like there have been talks that we had with developers about potentially implementing, because as IBI we implement a large scale townships. So essentially it's like a more controlled environment. So how in a controlled environment can we really bring that? So the first step is even to brainstorm and get the people who can make it happen, understand and see. So a lot of our discussions have been more focused there. And I like, again, on the community side working, I think to my knowledge, I think it has been more limited. I think it is more on the agency side is what we have done. I see the second question. The question is, hi Deepak, thanks so much for the presentation. Aside from potential building new infrastructure for sidewalk robots, how do you and your colleagues anticipate our current standards of land use, public land design having to change to accommodate CV, AVs, and other mobility technologies? Absolutely. I think these standards have to change. Like some of these new guidelines have to come into picture. I think, as Bruce mentioned in his presentation, in terms of a complete street, new guidelines have to come in to accommodate some of the AVs and CVs. Like I gave you the example of the Little Jeffrey. Like to accommodate things like Little Jeffries, we will have to have policies and guidelines to actually brought into our cities.
The whole curb space is a big unknown, as Deepak had mentioned, just getting the information to manage it well. But again, moving on how things may change within the public realm. Again, we've got a pick-up and drop-off spot for taxis and on-street parking, and how can we effectively transition our space to, again, accommodate kind of the various uses with AVs, be it ride-hailing or goods delivery and other such issues. Again, that's stuff that we know there's opportunity, but in terms of particular standards, how we should design them, what should we be putting in our transportation master plans to actually protect for it, other than to say that it's coming and we need to be prepared. But I think it's a case of we need to do that thinking discussion right now. I know the City of Toronto started some work there, some other municipalities have, but in terms of specifically what it means, we're really in the infancy, I'd say.
Yeah. I think the next question is that cities are planning for new infrastructure and road widening. They struggle to accommodate separate facilities for cyclists and pedestrians. How should they plan for AVs? Your thoughts, please.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's going to take a lot of discussion, and I guess even more recent discussions just to get complete streets implemented has required a real change in how municipalities approach road widenings and enhancements. One is to get that whole process started in the official plan process, rather than having it trickle down and then as an afterthought, thinking of how you put in pedestrians, how you put in cyclists after the fact, and again, making that an integral part of the process. Again, it gets hold of to the development charges and funding for it. All gets done upfront in the official plan process. I guess the hard part is right now there's so many different departments involved with the street. So that, again, there's no one champion. There's the traffic guys who have priorities that are different than the transit guys, and then there's the urban design people, et cetera, the police. Everybody has a stake in it, and nobody can really come up with that optimal individually. So I think it really takes a cross-sectional municipal task force or some entity to get together and to see that our goal is not to maximize traffic if you're a traffic engineer, or cars if you're a traffic engineer, or this if you're a pedestrian, but how can we make the best cities possible in the way that we want them to evolve? And so it's getting everybody from their disciplines and seeing the bigger visions that we want, and then working together so that we get the synergies and compatibility and try to minimize the negative impacts. You won't get everything, but what we want to achieve is the best cities possible. And I think it's still kind of in that consultation and discussion process, and kind of assess priorities on what type of cities we want.
And just to add to what Bruce said, like, again, I think one of the things is you really need to be clear about a city. What are our priorities, right? Like, again, there will be the cities started more planning for cars or vehicles than for people, and now as planners we have, like, there has been a lot of push to start planning cities for people, and that's where a lot of talks have started happening, that we need to have sidewalks, pedestrian needs to be segregated and all that. So it comes down to priorities that the city has. So again, if things like AVs are going to have a huge impact on lives of people, it will have impact on making our traffic more smoother. Maybe that is a priority of the city, and that is where the cities will have to start really thinking about, like, anything that we think now to execute is going to take next 10 years. Like, it's not going to happen in next 1 or 2 years. So the planning has to start now on that.
Mm-hmm. Next question, something that interests you in particular, Deepak. Would you say that smart cities infrastructure would be best to help with AV adoption?
I absolutely agree. Like, again, in terms of like, again, for me, smartness is also how do you best utilize your infrastructure. So if I am let's say putting an infrastructure in place which is like a 5G enabled infrastructure for the entire city, I can use it for my CAVs, I can use it for other things to do it in the city. So again, like, again, smart city is a little bit too widely used term, I must say. But, like, again, in terms of what I would say is smart use of infrastructure, where the infrastructure is used for multiple things, would be very interesting. So again, that's where the curbside becomes also important. So can you dynamically manage the curbside? So in the morning, the curbside is getting used for, let's say, deliveries, but in the afternoon, it's used for some other use. Like in the afternoon, maybe it's used for restaurants, like what we did in Toronto, like with the curb TO project. So the dynamically the curbside is being changed. So that's smartness for me, where the same infrastructure is utilized for different use cases.
I think we have time for one last question. Sidewalks are already scarce resources. Patios, street vendors, furniture zones, and soon delivery robots. Any thoughts about how these changes will impact vulnerable road users and pedestrians? And yeah, that's part of that complete streets type of approach that I mentioned earlier. And again, we're changing kind of the philosophy or the emphasis from moving vehicles to moving people and being people places. And in terms of allocating space, the newer complete street cross sections, we're looking to providing more space for pedestrians, cycle lanes, but also looking at speeds. And again, with more transit, more walking, more cycling, more compact cities, we can reduce our dependence on vehicles.
Okay, I think that was all, Bruce. So with that, I think we'd like to close the session. Like maybe like Justin, like to welcome you back to stage.
Great. Well, and thank you so much, Bruce and Deepak. Great insights and a really cool lens on all the opportunities that are ahead with autonomous vehicle technologies, along with some of the opportunities that will help us solve some of the challenges too that you mentioned. So thank you very much for your time today, and really appreciate hearing from you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you.
And for those of you that are just joining us, my name is Justin Gamage. I'm from Ontario Tech University. The sessions that are being presented today are being recorded, so you can go back and replay the session that just took place if you did miss it. And I also want to point out that there is an opportunity to ask questions in the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. So when you do have questions as the next presenter is coming on and doing their talk, please make sure you do enter your questions in there, and we'll be sure to get to them. And once again, just sort of a bit more housekeeping. All the bios and details of the event are on the website. So if you need to get additional detail, please do check out the website. And for those of you that are looking at this event via the live stream option, if you do want to engage in this discussions, please register at the link on the website that is on your screen to join that discussion. So without further ado, I want to introduce Jason Lee, who is founder and CEO of SmartCone Technologies. He'll be coming onto the stage with me in a moment, and we'll share some of the innovations that his team is developing and implementing in communities in Canada, across North America, and around the world. Over to you, Jason.
Hi, everybody. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for the introduction, Justin. Very excited about the presentation today. So before we get started, I'm going to stop sharing my video so that we can play a little news clip and then I'll get into the presentation.
Well, Keen and Alicia, usually when there's a problem in an area, police have to go out and monitor it. However, this SmartCone technology picks up on data for both drivers and pedestrians, allowing them to keep an eye out without actually having to be there.
This might look like a surveillance camera, but that's not its purpose. The cameras pointed towards St. Paul behind Pierce Middle School help collect data.
The number of vehicles that would go through an intersection, the speed of vehicles, how many pedestrians are going through an intersection.
So the cameras help collect the data. From there, the data feeds to a server. And from there, that data is then sent to the police department.
All those pieces of technology work together in one unit to give us all that data at one time, which is a cost savings for number one, a manpower savings.
Right now, SmartCone is set up at 2 locations. The second is at Nottingham and Kercheval. The SmartCone system can be moved to other intersections, helping reassure people seeing those traffic issues.
And so the feedback we're getting from our residents and customers is that there's been a great change in the pattern of traffic, the speeds, and they feel that the safety for the kids crossing has excelled increasingly.
Next Energy is a nonprofit technology company out of Detroit, helping facilitate between SmartCone and police. I'm told there is a long-term goal to help develop new ways of communicating issues at an intersection to drivers.
In the future, that signal will go to the actual control unit in the vehicle, and it will be seamless, like a machine-to-machine communication.
Now, these cameras can be used as a surveillance system, but at this time, that's not what police are using it for. It's just to monitor the traffic in the area, collect that data, and get a better understanding. Allie Hoxie, 7 Action News.
Thanks for playing that. That's some exciting stuff. Clearly, for a company like SmartCone, it's always great to get good news, but to be involved in a leading edge market and helping shape the future for vulnerable road users is really exciting. So, okay. So for those of you who are not familiar with SmartCone Technologies, we are an edge-based product. We started off our technology as what I call cloudless technology. It was designed in partnership with some of the military groups back in the late in 2009 timeframe for safety and surveillance in around the world to different applications. So we've been at this for over a decade now, and we founded SmartCone in 2015 and redirected that technology into cities and airports and things like that. And so when we had the opportunity to talk about this particular application and smart cities, it's a great opportunity for us as we've been involved in many aspects of autonomous and freight tracking and movement and safety and so on, including the video you just saw, which is we're very privileged to be part of, and operating multiple shuttle bus projects around North America, and then also working with logistics. So I'm going to cover in this presentation who SmartCone is from a technology perspective, and then some of the applications that we've been working with, and then we can get into the questions. So just to share where we are with, sorry, there you go, the technology itself. So SmartCone is a technology ecosystem, we call it, and we support a variety of applications that are just all across the board. And if some of you have been following us on LinkedIn, you'll see that we even have a couple of space programs now, which is pretty exciting. And so then people ask us, well, what is SmartCone? Well, SmartCone is a technology ecosystem, and you can see from the pucks, and as you know, being a Canadian, I guess pucks fits. You can see from these modules that the capabilities for providing solutions are endless. And then every time we add a new modular capability, like you see in these little pucks, then you can stack them together to really solve a lot of problems. And when you look at, well, at least when we look at the vulnerable road user autonomous operations, whether it be for freight or manufacturing or vehicles or whatever the case is, these are complex problems that offer a lot of challenges. And and so using a platform that can handle the ability to use LiDAR, radar, cameras, AI, RFID, ultra wideband, all these things in unison across a distributed network like in a city, and that's the kind of toolkit we believe that is required to do a job like that, at least in part. And then cloud solutions, connectivity, and software is that's the partnership that we work with often with some of these solutions. So it's a collaborative model, but it certainly does support a lot of these use cases in parallel at the same time, which again is required. So you can see on the bottom left-hand corner the stack of the SmartCone, which actually is a tube, and I get the irony of that. It used to be SmartCone because of the traffic cones, and we still do that often as a skin. And then the term SmartCone just stuck because smart tube just doesn't sound as appealing technologically as a SmartCone. Anyway, so lots of different things happening there, and so let's get into a few of the projects that we deployed, starting with the Grosse Pointe Park solution. So in this particular case, we have multiple cameras on a utility pole with AI modules and radar in the system. And what we're doing here is we're monitoring the speed of the traffic as it goes back and forth, and then we're using AI in the cameras to count and characterize the vehicle size and type that's going through that, and we're fusing all that information together. And it deploys very quickly. It's a low-cost deployment powered by the utility pole, and we can put these all over the place. We also have Wi-Fi access points available in them for accessibility or providing bandwidth to rural areas and so on and so forth at the same time. And again, the reason we did that way is because real estate is really a commodity, it's a finite resource on hydro poles, utility poles, and so on and so forth. And so by keeping it as one single footprint that gives you that platform, really is a good business case for cities to do things like detecting pedestrians, activating car crosswalks, collecting information on cars, CO2 level monitoring, all of the applications that are supporting what smart cities are doing. And moving logistics around as well is key. So tracking RFID tags and ultra wideband tags and so on and so forth, license plate recognition, all the things that are happening right now in the world, we support those things. and that makes it a good business case and a tool for rolling out an infrastructure in smart cities. So there's a couple of things happening here. One, we're showing just again, some of the applications we support, but you can see how we've evolved the technology as well, starting with the top left picture, which is the Grosse Pointe picture that you saw. And then the one beside it is our new iteration of the smart cone, which is a little cleaner looking, and it's an evolution. But the top of it is actually an environmental monitoring device. So that does things like solar loading, so that you can do things like see how hot parks are, or streets are, so that the vulnerable road users we're not just protecting them from vehicles moving around, but at the same time looking at the sun exposure and heat exposure for the life sciences side of SmartCone. And so that's also an exciting in that it's going beyond the transportation into the user experience as people in parks and things like that, which really expands to a whole new dimension. And then you've got your standard AI categorization and classification tools on the bottom left, which we can do vehicle type, size, color, people, dogs, whatever it is that we need to do from understanding how these people and objects look to vehicles and cars. And obviously the ultimate goal there is to take all this information and send it out to all the vehicles so that they can start making decisions about the city and the route way in advance. And that's the part of having the intelligent infrastructure, is that the cars that are flying through it, or the forklifts or whatever it is, are all getting information way ahead of where they're going to be, so they can make better decisions quickly. And our vision of what that can really turn into is your standard cities and how they're built now, based on the way traffic moves around now. We see that that's going to completely change in the future. As transportation becomes automated, roads will look differently, and sidewalks will probably get larger, and there's a whole bunch of things that will change there. In order to really understand what that looks like, we have to gather data and classify it and categorize it. And our role in the world is to work with many companies to have a technology platform that they can all use, so that we can be efficient about deploying these things. And this is just a fun picture of some of the projects that we worked on. It's also highlighting what we call the Smart Torch. And for some of you that know AutoGuardian by SmartCone, which is a subsidiary of SmartCone, and AutoGuardian is our shuttle bus operation and smart city infrastructure for connected and safe cities. And you can see that there's what we call a Smart Torch, which is the flashing beacon. And that's an intelligent device. It communicates with the onboard module of the vehicle. It has audio in it to be able to help give instructions to the vulnerable road user, or people who visually impaired. We can give audio instructions and so on and so forth. But it also cues the flashing lights, so that in mixed traffic scenarios where you have autonomous vehicles and traditional vehicles, that the driver of a traditional vehicle can see that there's an autonomous vehicle there, or vulnerable road users. So we're just drawing their attention with lights and coordinating safety. This is a picture of our Town of Whitby project. And again, it was an AVEN program that we're currently working on deploying now. And the route is the purple line at the bottom of that the picture there. And this is a fairly long track through the Town of Whitby, where we've deployed multiple smart cones, and we're using, in partnership with Nokia and their private LTE system, for monitoring, constant monitoring of the vehicle and the equipment throughout the route. And there's multiple bus stops. So in this case, it's a mixed traffic situation where we have users going from a GO station all the way through the tourism park of the Whitby and then back around. It's a really great application. And our goal here was not just to demonstrate the mixed traffic operations, but was actually the business model on how to make money from this and how to have it be sustainable after the demonstration, which is really the key, right? So providing demonstrations is fantastic. It shows the viability and pushes technology forward, which is super important. But it's also important to understand how to make a business of it and how to help push it forward so it becomes a reality. And that's really the part that we're super interested in. We now have 4 shuttle bus programs that we're operating, not just from the safety side, but also like from the infrastructure side, I mean, for safety, but also for the full operations. So we're now working with multiple shuttle bus companies where we take the full engineer on board and the maintenance and the ticketing and the end-to-end gamut. And we feel there's a great future in that. So and now we're getting to we showed the vulnerable road user side with the Grosse Pointe Park solution. We've talked about the shuttle bus operations and the Whitby program, and we have 4 in total there. And then the final piece to our story of autonomous freight tracking is what we've done with this forklift. So with the world's largest freight company, for the last couple of years, we've been working with them, proving out our smart cone mounted on a forklift, which is what you see here, that the tube there. And I had to black out yellow out the company's name. They'd like to keep that private. But it's for 18,000 forklifts we're working with, and we've mounted a smart cone onto the equipment. So you can see the installation was very quick, just mounted to the side of the vehicle and attached the power. And then on the top there, you see a little anchor, which is right, I don't know if you can see my pointer, but it's here at the top. So we put an array of anchors in the ceiling of factories, and we can also do this outside. And so what happens is, as the forklift moves around, there are little RFID tags in each of the boxes, and we mark the XY coordinate position of the box. We move it from one place to the other, and it's completely automated their inventory. Already finding packages and looking at efficiencies has just been incredible for them. So it's a great application. So mixing this with an autonomous vehicle is our next step, which we're working on now, and that's the beginning of showing this autonomous freight movement, and using the vulnerable road user technology to provide safety for all the pedestrians is also really exciting, because one of the things that we all have to be aware of, and I've heard it in the presentations, which were great, by the way, the other presentations were excellent, is that providing that in mixed traffic is really the key. When you want to find efficiencies and continue operations and having life move on at a positive rate, then you need to be able to coordinate safety and operations. And when your vehicle stops because there's a person there and so on and so forth, that offers a lot of delays. And it's safety first, so we don't want to argue with that. But we've got to be able to get to the point where we can operate these things at real speed and keep safety with everybody integrated. And that takes a lot of coordination and monitoring and data and sensors and all this stuff. And so that's the super exciting for us, because that's the world we live in, is back to how we started Smart Cone and the architecture over a decade ago, was how do you put first responders in a situation where there's a lot of stuff happening at once and decisions have to be made quickly, and safety is key. And that's what we feel, that we've created a platform to do that. We've created multiple solutions out there that are big installations, and we've learned about a lot of different things in doing that. We've put, was it 4 billion minutes of edge-based video analytics through our technology in the last over the last decade of actually deployed technology. And we've learned a lot of lessons there, and the freight tracking piece is a real-world application of moving autonomy to the next level. And so we're super excited about that. And that's kind of Smart Cone and the activities that we're involved in right now. And so with that, I'd like to open it up to some questions and discussion.
Hey, Jason.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Great to hear from you again today. And there's been a lot of technologies that you've been developing in partnership with institutions like Ontario Tech and through the AVEN community. I wondered if you could share anything about sort of some of the key things that these partnerships with us have sort of basically helped you bring the technologies to market.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I should have put a slide in there for that. So I'm sorry that I didn't actually bring that question up. But I've got to tell you that Canada is played a huge role in our company, and we're very patriotic. And the schools and the universities, academia has been huge. UOIT, CITM, Invest Ottawa, University of Ottawa has been great. Especially our relationship with Ontario Tech University has been phenomenal. Right from the time that's how we got into AVEN. We have our sensors deployed at the GM Centers of Excellence, which is next level stuff for us. The resources coming out of the schools these days are right on mark for us to be able to use them commercially to help development solutions and networking opportunities and introductions to companies. It's led to our success. It's absolutely 100% without involvement of organizations like Ontario Tech U, and we wouldn't have met IBM or Nokia or any of these other parties that are just really leading to the success of the company. So 100%, I would say that the involvement of academia has been huge. Great.
Thanks. There are some questions here popping up, and maybe I can read them out to you. And this actually the first question I want to add a sort of a twist to it. And the first question is, what opportunities could you see for your technology to help educate the general public and feel safe with AVs, sidewalk drones included? And I want to add the twist I want to add to that is how do you see the approaches you take to educate differ based on the jurisdictions that you're exporting your technology to? So you can imagine that if you're deploying technology in Toronto, it might be a little bit different than Detroit, it might be different than in Europe and things of this nature, just because of cultural differences.
The whole world revolves around human factors, and in technology, we can often forget that. We get so excited about what the thing does, and we forget about who's using it. And at SmartCone, we really try to remember that. I have a background in training and herd dynamics and things like that. So communicating to masses and providing comfort level and familiarity to technology is a big thing. So that when you go into a city or a group of people, that you can instantly build rapport and safety and confidence with the cities. And that's a really big thing. When you put something foreign in somewhere, people are very challenged by it, and they have a hard time understanding how it fits the paradigm. So, SmartCone itself, like using a cone, is one of those things where people are familiar with cones. It's a familiar setting that they know what to do with, which is one of the beauties of having a cone. And then providing natural voices and information that's not confrontational to people is also key to that, which is a messaging piece, the audio piece. But then making it fun too. So we have the ability to put on our cones really great digital signs, and as holograms come into play, just showing and putting signage and welcoming and setting that stage is the key, we believe, for adopting that. But also, one of the important things is communicating to the masses, not just to individuals. So many times when we do signaling solutions out there in the world, we forget that we're talking to a group of people, not one person. And so that deployment of the physical piece to make it look welcoming, and then also the audio piece is great. And then communicating with the drones. What we really want to do from my perspective is we want to give the drones a bit of a personality. So when you're walking down the street and you have sidewalk drones, that there's a level of respect and collaboration between the people walking and the drone, and so it's not adversarial. And that's the problem, right? Because you can say excuse me to a human, but you can't say excuse me to a drone. And so that breaking those barriers down, just in kind of what I've said there in a few minutes, wrapping up there, breaking the barriers down so that people feel the respect and the drones feel the respect of that collaboration on the sidewalk is the key. We can do that through infrastructure, lighting and sounds and so on and so forth to help build that rapport.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And the next question is it possible for a smart cone to communicate with a mobile device? And I guess a second component of it, what do you have to think about from a cybersecurity standpoint when those communications do happen?
So we already do communicate to mobile phones. So that's already part of our solution. And as far as the cybersecurity piece goes, we employ and use all the cybersecurity solutions that are out there today. But I think the one thing that's really important to know is that SmartCone has a data repository on the device as well that's locked into the sensor. So what that means from a cybersecurity perspective is that it's not just available for anybody to get. You have to have the credentials and you have to use your API and so on and to secure the data correctly. So it's not just available for anybody to get to. So that's locked down. And then, the other part is a privacy thing. That's always a big question when you're dealing with smart city data and public data. And our view on that is that, SmartCone itself, even though you have all these sensors, is one sensor in itself. And so when the data is on the SmartCone, it stays on the SmartCone, and there's really no use for it, meaning that people can be rest assured that the data is locked into the sensor and no one's looking at it. And when they do want to look at it, then it's up to the subscriber of the data to justify and explain what it is that they're doing with it. And that's a transparent thing for people, so that there's a peace of mind that if you're walking down the road and there's a camera, it doesn't mean that someone's looking at the camera. It actually means that it's just providing information, that there's a purpose for it, that some other company may be using. And that's a new concept because, as you know, typically when sensors get deployed in a city, that they stream data just to a cloud. And then who knows where it's going? And that's the big question. In this case, that's not what happens. What happens is all the data is stored in the infrastructure, staying right there. Nobody's doing anything with it until someone uses an app, but they have to disclose to the public what the app is used for. So the data stays in the sensor, so they can be rest assured that it's being protected by our SmartCone for sure.
Great, thanks. Another question that came up is Jason, could you share which airports you're working with, or maybe generally more broadly some of the other companies or jurisdictions you're working with?
So I won't say the exact airports, but we're all over Nevada, we're all over Florida, we're all over different spots in California, some in Boston, places like that. Yep. We've been deployed there for 6 years in these places. So it's about 1,500 cameras that we have deployed and asset tracking.
Yeah. And the next question is near and dear to my heart because I do work at Ontario Tech at the Automotive Center of Excellence. And the question is, how does rain, snow, lighting condition interfere with the performance of the devices? I certainly know how you test them. Device is easy to move around, and what kind of maintenance costs are involved with these equipment?
Well, there's a lot of answers there because there's a lot of things being said, but for sure, the maintenance part of it is we've had some of our equipment deployed for over 6 years, and they've done nothing to it. So it really depends on what you're using it for, and the environment it's in, and so on and so forth. So, and then it's all over the air updates and stuff like that, which you typically get from technology. So I'd say the maintenance of it is fairly low, unless you're in a very, rugged environment, throwing it around and stuff. Then but it's really robust. From the rain, snow, and so on and so forth, those are largely sensor-related questions and communications-related questions. So there's an element of engineering that has to go into whatever sensor array and application you're going with. And so SmartCone helps with that engineering, and we use the right sensor for the right application. So if you're talking about LiDAR, for example, and I think that's probably one of the big things we have over a decade of experience in laser-based solutions in atmospheric conditions. So, you can't change physics. So physics is what it is. You can try your best to do, all sorts of modulations and other things to defeat that. But for us, we see in environmental conditions using multiple technologies. For example, ultrasonic, acoustic, and LiDAR, things like that to defeat all weather conditions that get deployed. And then a fusion system really brings that into making sure that you have that efficiencies throughout the whole operation. And that's our view on it, is that you can't defeat physics, but you can use multiple dimensions of technology to ensure that you have a successful application. We have patents in fiber, patents in optical, and also ultrasonic applications for that exact solution.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, Jason, we're basically out of time, and I want to take a moment to thank you and for your talk and all the work you're doing with the Avon teams in Durham and Ottawa and Hamilton and Windsor. So thanks once again. And yes, I appreciate that discussion. We look forward to hearing more about all the great things Smart Tone continues to do in the future.
Well, thank you very much. Bye.
With that, I'd like to bring up a video, and it's a video that's our featured video for today's talk, and it's from VIA. VIA is a leader in providing microtransit solutions to partners around the globe. Let's check out the video that was used and taken at the ITS World Congress in Singapore in 2019, which highlights the need for mobility on demand and how the world of transportation is changing and how VIA is leading the way.
Most of our transportation is very sort of old-fashioned, and it's been like that for almost a decade.
In Brazil, we are facing a business crisis in public transportation.
Most people are moving from London. We have the youngest population in 25. So we need to do something different. Typical buses, trams won't meet our needs.
So I think with on-demand, it can provide an opportunity and also solution for the customer, especially in Thailand, Bangkok.
I think it really helps to cover the first and last kilometer. And it's also a flexible solution for them. They can just decide to move whatever they want because you don't have to book in advance.
There are many, many smarter ways of moving around, which really can help to reduce congestion. So I do think that services such as VIA can very much blend in well within the whole transportation ecosystem.
I think on-demand transport allows us to rebuild and redefine what public transport is. It allows us to build more efficient systems. It builds a better customer experience for the public and allows more people to use the public transport system for currently what we're doing now.
We believe that on-demand service in Brazil can bring a service that is more safer, more comfortable, and from which the people can get more free time to do other activities.
Great, thank you. And I did want to take a moment to acknowledge that Women's Day is next week, and with International Women's Day coming up next week, we want to acknowledge that we realize that this conference and this day in particular is very male heavy. And it's something that we all want to work on doing a better job of next year. But I want to say, and I've already mentioned a lot of the people behind today's event, I want to say a big thank you to all the women that have been part of making sure this event goes off without a hitch today. And once again, this includes Kaylee, Miss Melissa, Isabella, Paula, and Jennifer, and the entire team with the Durham and the entire team at both Durham and the Hamilton RTDSs that have really been instrumental in making this event go off without a hitch. And moving on to the next discussion, I want to introduce Dan Ruby, who's going to be the moderator for the next discussion. Dan is the sector manager for the automotive mobility team at Ontario Centre of Innovation, and he's a true champion of businesses across the province. And I've had the pleasure of working with Dan in so many different partnerships and different types of opportunities across the province. So Dan, over to you, and welcome to the talk today.
Thank you, Justin. Hopefully the volume is okay.
It's great.
Yes. And likewise, Justin, it's been a great pleasure of mine to work with you over these past, I guess, 5 years now in our respective roles. I'm happy to be moderating this closing panel of this great 3-day event on the future of transportation and mobility. And I'd like to congratulate you, Justin, and also Richard and Chris and Sherry and all the supporting staff that you had just went through there, Justin, for making this past 3 days so engaging and educational. So big thank you to the whole team. This final panel is on the standards, technologies, and policies necessary for municipal readiness. This will be an interactive conversation between the panelists with a general theme around municipal readiness. What are the challenges that we're facing? And then what are some of the potential solutions that can be done now and in the future? I'd like to invite the audience to participate throughout the panel discussion, and we will get to as many of those questions as possible in due course. I'd like to start off by inviting the panelists to introduce themselves, and we'll start with Bern Grush, the co-founder and Chief Innovation Officer at Harmonize Mobility.
Thanks, Dan. This is such a great conference. So happy to be here. So happy to be involved. My name is Bern Grush, and I'm a systems design engineer and a human factors engineer. Thanks so much to Jason for mentioning that as an important discipline. What I do is I focus on large area deployment of automated systems. For example, the acceptance of automation at level 4 and the acceptance of vehicle sharing. So all of the work that we do or I do is in that area. So all of this work is targeted at reducing private vehicle ownership. That's the focus of everything. For example, one of the systems that we have is to manage micro-subsidies to increase transit use and to reduce private vehicle use. But most importantly for today, we lead the ISO project to address automated vehicles at the curb and the standards for the automated robots on the sidewalk. And this standard especially addresses all of the issues that Deepak Darda and Bruce Morey outlined from IBI Group today. That was a very valuable talk, and it leads exactly into all the things that I'm doing and I'm going to be talking about throughout this conversation. Thanks.
Thanks, Bern. I agree. I tuned in for that morning session as well, and it read like a Cole's notes of our discussion here coming now. So it's very, very relevant. Thank you, Bern. I'd now next like to introduce Scott. Looks like Scott's having some trouble, so I'll come back to Scott. I'll introduce next Jamie. Jamie Austin is the Deputy General Manager of Business Services at Durham Region Transit. Over to you, Jamie, for a brief self-introduction.
Yes, thanks. Thanks, Dan, and great to be here today as well. Share what some of the exciting work that we're doing at Durham Region Transit. And Dan mentioned that I'm the Deputy General Manager for Business Services, where I'm responsible for a broad range of financial, customer service, IT, other administrative responsibilities for the organization, in addition to leading efforts to modernize our transit services for the benefit of our passengers and the public in areas such as fleet electrification, new service models that include autonomous and connected vehicles, contactless fare payment, and other customer-focused solutions. I actually came to Durham Region Transit about 3 years ago from the Ministry of Transportation Ontario. There I led policy and regulatory efforts to leverage and incentivize emerging technologies to maximize the public benefit when it comes to things like safety and sustainability and congestion management. And this included leading ministry's policy efforts to support autonomous and connected vehicles, which included the establishment of AVIN at the time, as well as electric vehicles, cycling, road pricing, and other emerging issues. So thank you again. Great to be here. I look forward to the discussion.
Thanks for joining us, Jamie. Very happy to have you on the panel. I see, Scott, looks like your challenges have been overcome. So I will now head on over to Scott Butler, the Executive Director at the Ontario Good Roads Association, to say a few words of introduction.
Thanks, Dan. My name is Scott Butler, Executive Director at OGRA. We are the oldest municipal association, I believe, in Canada, certainly in Ontario, having been founded in 1894. So we've been at this game for 127 years. Our membership is comprised of approximately 430 and roughly 430 municipal members in Ontario, and approximately 20 First Nations. We've been looking at the issue of connected and autonomous vehicles for, I would say, the last 5 years in earnest. When it comes to the issue of municipal readiness, I'm here to douse any sort of enthusiasm the panel may have.
Thank you, Scott. And last but not least, we have Michael Pollowin, who is a partner at Gowling. Michael, please say a few words.
Dan, thank you. I guess Scott and I are going to be the wet blankets at the party. I'm a partner at Gowling WLG. I'm also the leader of Gowling's National Municipal Law Group. In that role, we spend an awful lot of time fighting, conversing with cities on a variety of issues. And about 5 years ago, we were asked to speak at a conference by put on by the Conference Board of Canada on the issue of automated vehicles. And so we knew nothing about it, and we had to educate ourselves. And like this, it was about the readiness of municipalities. Our conclusion 5 years ago, and every time we've been asked since, is municipalities are simply not ready. There's an explanation for that, which is that municipalities do not have the human and financial resources necessary to do the kinds of in-depth research that will be required to look at the needs of automated vehicles. And as a consequence, they're waiting for somebody else to do it. That's not uncommon in the municipal world, but it is true. And as we go along, I guess now, together with Scott, will be those saying, well, that all sounds quite lovely, but here's what cities haven't done yet, and the province and the federal government, to address these issues.
Thank you, Michael. You've jumped us forward into the say wet blanket. I was going to address that first question to you. The question being, are municipalities ready? So you've already answered that question. Can you give us, Michael, we'll keep going with you here.
Sure.
Do you think municipalities are?
Sorry, Dan, you're breaking up. Can you repeat the question, please?
That's unfortunate. My computer has entered fan hot mode, so hopefully that will it'll cool down and this won't be a continuous problem for the panel. The question, Michael, is in terms of municipal readiness, can you give us some examples as to why you think municipalities are not ready for the coming autonomous revolution?
So let me give you a small example, small in size, as well as a small and easily fixed. Looking only at the city of Toronto and the city of Ottawa, when we did a paper on this about 3.5 years ago, what we discovered is, to no one's surprise, vehicles are not allowed on sidewalks. The bylaws of both municipalities provide that. So sidewalk robots, as part of last mile delivery, are not permitted. When you see families riding their bikes along sidewalks, that's not permitted either. And similarly, if you look at the bike paths, which are becoming more and more ubiquitous in larger centers, vehicles are not allowed there either. So that's a small example of something that will have to change. But it extends to issues, for example, of potential liabilities. If there's an accident involving an automated vehicle, who's responsible? Is it the manufacturer? Is it the municipality who built the roads? Is it the contractor who may have made a mistake in how the roads were built? Is it the software engineers who wrote the program code? And then you get into issues of smart roads and dumb roads, and how does that work? Insurance companies are going to be really interested in answering that question before they're prepared to put insurance on automated vehicles. You know, those are two examples, but there are others. You know,
Michael, I'm gonna cut in here and
okay,
and
I can go on for 45 minutes, so do that.
And we'll come back to some of the other examples, but you've hit on one that I think is very relevant to the other panelists on the panel here. So I'm going to give them an opportunity to interject with their thoughts. And I apologize to the audience if you can hear some background. It's my my fan in my computer. I'll stay off video, and hopefully the fan will calm down. And I'll go on mute while I'm not talking. Anyway, the sidewalk robot issue is, I think, hits close to home to Burn Brush. There is no existing sidewalk traffic act, and I think Burn's been active in this space. So Burn, let me pass the conversation over to you on the moment, and see what you can add to this sidewalk conversation.
Thanks, Dan. You know, part of the issue for what Michael's addressing is municipalities not being ready. You have to give municipalities a break. Ready for what? We've been hyping the heck out of this technology. We've not said exactly what it's going to look like. I can't imagine a municipality really knows how to set regulations. Some of the municipalities that have funding can study it. Toronto's doing a great job of studying it, but it's very difficult to set regulations. It's very difficult to set to decide what exactly the infrastructure should look like. For example, just the issue of sidewalk robots themselves, which is, I know it's not a new idea, and it's been around for a couple of years, but it's just gotten municipal attention in the last, I would say, the last 18 months or 24 months. Only a couple of cities have studied it. Already San Francisco said, no, take them out of here, and then changed their mind and said, okay, we'll study it. So we're so early in this, we're not even, municipalities aren't even sure whether they should permit them or not, much less how they should permit them, how they should license them, how they should be insured. And most of all, and this is what the work that I do with the international standard is, how are they going to be managed? In other words, you saw earlier today, one of the images from IBI Group, they showed a sidewalk with like 40 or 50 robots plying on that one sidewalk. Well, that's obviously unworkable. I don't think anyone would say that makes sense. But how is it that that gets regulated? How does a city say only 4 at a time, or 3 at a time, or 9 at a time? More complicated, how does the city say it's okay to have 3 over here, and it's okay to have 6 over there, and it's not okay to have any at all on that sidewalk? So how does that manage? And the standards is for that. But it's very, very early for municipalities to actually know what to do. And they're really in a tight spot, I think. And so that's a fundamental concern for that readiness for deployment.
Thanks, Bern. Bern, maybe dive a little deeper on these sidewalk robots. Walk us through how a sidewalk robot is currently implemented, and then maybe we can talk about what does it mean. Where does that lead us in terms of what we need to do? So first, start off by giving us a deeper dive into the sidewalk robot itself and its interaction.
So far, all robots are teleoperated. So you saw the picture of the Jeffrey in Toronto. There's a person sitting on a joystick in an office a few blocks away, that's actually guiding that machine. Some sidewalk robots are entirely guided, 100% guided by an operator. Some are partially guided by an operator. So the ones, for example, from the company called Starship, those are, they claim they're 98% self. In other words, it's like a level 3 conditional. They are almost always can handle their own circumstance unless they come to a situation where they can't handle it. And then the person on a joystick, the person in the control room, takes over. So here's the advanced state of these on sidewalks. Now there are automated robots in special circumstances, military and so on, but let's just talk about only the sidewalk. Those robots have to have a human watching them, teleoperated. The very best that is the status now is that some of these companies, one person can operate 2 or 3 or 4 at a time. The goal is for one person to operate 20 at a time. Now, we're not there yet. And you can start to imagine a system with 30 operators all looking at 15 screens, like a big control room, and the sort of trading off. That's somewhat in the distance, but that gives us a viable system once we get to that point, and we're on our way to that. That's just the operational side. The real problem is that we don't know how yet to measure readiness. So is this particular block face ready for 2 or 4, 8 at a time? Are the residents and retailers that live or operate on this block face, do they want them? Are they willing to have them? How many are they willing to tolerate? Or are they going to lobby against them and so forth? So all of that's unknown as well. So, you know, again, back to Michael's point, it's hard to say, well, the municipalities are behind, because I'm saying, behind on what? You haven't told me enough of the problem for me to decide as a municipality to make any decisions or to provide any regulation.
So I'm going to go a little deeper with you, Bern, before I pass it off to our other panelists here. So in terms of these sidewalk robots, we need some type of system in place that it currently doesn't exist. And you recently wrote a paper on international standards for robot passengers in goods vehicles. What are some of the issues that you flagged in that paper?
Well, you need a ground control system, and the ground control system for robo-taxis. Let's talk about robo-taxis just for a minute. Right now, if a taxi, an Uber or a taxi or a truck, wants to park somewhere, and you saw IBI showed there's just a bunch of signs. You look at all the parking signs to figure out where you can pull over. If you're in a taxi or an Uber ride hailing, generally the vehicle stops often in the throughway, or it might pull a little bit to the side of the road. It would often park on top of a bicycle lane. That sort of behavior, quick unload or load behavior, double parking and so forth, that's not workable in an automated world. You can kind of get away with it a little bit, and that's what we've been doing for the last 100 years with cars and taxis, but that's not going to work with automated vehicles, stopping on a bicycle lane and so forth. So the very first thing that has to happen for those systems, there has to be a reservation. And if that reservation is not freed up for some mishap of some sort, you have to be able to re-reserve or bump that vehicle to another spot. So you're on your way somewhere, there's a spot for you, it's not available. It has to tell the system, the V2X system has to tell your vehicle to go to spot 31 instead of spot 17, and so forth. And then it gets more complicated because maybe that spot is not close enough, because maybe your passenger is on a wheelchair, and maybe that the other spots that are available are not suitable for that person to get out of the vehicle in that circumstance. So then what happens? Does the taxi return to origin? Does it circle the block until a spot clears up? Does it flash lights and stop in the middle of the road? So those rules, the regulations for how that vehicle should behave, are unwritten. That's just, I'll let that go for that's just the robo-taxi and the automated truck. Consider now the sidewalk. this is a space that's not ever been automated before. People have taken bicycles and skateboards on the sidewalks, but that's not a space for machines that are unaccompanied by humans. So that's new. If we do this, then how fast can they go? How heavy can they be? How many can there be, and so forth? That has to be set locally, maybe set block by block by a municipality that lays out a map of what's permitted where. Then how does the company go back to that Jeffrey? How does that Jeffrey machine know that it can go on that sidewalk at that time at the weight and size that it is? So it needs to query a system. I need to go from A to B. When can I do that? Or can I do that now? Or can I do that at my size and weight and so forth? So however that's negotiated, it's negotiated between the robot or the machine or the operator of that machine and the infrastructure, the sidewalk or the curb. So the sidewalk is much more complicated than the curb. If we think that we don't know how to handle ride hailing, which we don't, the sidewalk is much worse. Again, back to Michael's point, we haven't described it enough. We haven't defined a problem and a solution well enough for the municipalities to adopt it. And anyways, cut it short, that's what the standard is about. The standard is about setting the procedures and protocol and data so that such a VTX system can be written, but the standard is not writing a system, it's just setting up the protocol for it.
Right, and I think the system is something we want to touch on it again, but I want to bring in the other two panelists that haven't had a chance to talk yet. I do want to encourage all of the panelists, all four of you, if you have an add-on thought to what any of your co-panelists are speaking on, feel free to interject, interrupt, ask questions of each other. But I do want to bring in Scott and Jamie here. So let me start off by bringing in Scott. Bern and Michael we've started the conversation identifying some challenges that we're going to have to overcome. In terms of OGRA, Scott, where do you see OGRA playing, and what's OGRA bringing to the table in this in regard to these challenges?
Perspective in realpolitik. I think what we have seen over time is, I mean, let's go back. 1894, we found an organization. The primary modality on the roads at the time is horse, right? And we're trying to build roads for that. We've seen a lot of change in the course of the last century and a quarter. This just feels like the latest iteration. And every time one of these technological advances happens, one of these innovations that happen, they end up bumping up against the realities of what it's like to be in local government. Local government has an outsized sense of responsibility for a whole host of everyday considerations for constituents. Transportation is one of them. They also have almost no capacity, or relatively no capacity, to actually, to the point Michael raised, have disposable capital that they can put towards maximizing the potential or the perceived potential of these innovations. And I know we didn't come here for a constitutional discussion on the allocation of fiscal responsibilities between orders of government, but in fact, it's a reality. What was set out between municipalities, provinces, and the federal government in 1867 doesn't really have a lot of, the resonance to today is getting a little stretched. I think the other thing that happens is municipalities tend to be, so through the road authorities, they tend to be the environment where all this experimentation takes place. And I'm sure Michael can tell you absolute hair-raising stories about what liability looks like in municipal roadways. The tort law environment ensures that regardless of whatever sort of pontificating we do here, municipalities will get sued for egregious amounts of money when one of these devices goes wrong. I think that is a fundamental aspect of any sort of roadway management, is that given the nature of some of the way liability is apportioned in Ontario, that they will be left holding some of the real world development costs. I don't know. I'm just the reality of how these devices move from theoretical concepts to real world application. That said, we're very optimistic. We see the benefits of this. We're cautious, though, that if Ottawa and Toronto are struggling to find the resources to prepare for this, Puss Lynch and the nation municipality in Northwestern Ontario have absolutely no hope. So I think that really what we might be able to offer is a sense that given the right circumstances, municipalities, I think, can be important partners in moving forward these technologies. But we also need to caution industry that they need to understand the realities municipalities find themselves in more broadly. I'm sure you can allow that.
Yeah, you mentioned municipalities kind of need to be engaged in pilot projects, and I think that's a good opening to bring Jamie in. Jamie, I'll ask you to join the conversation here. Feel free to bring any thoughts on the previous pieces that we've talked about, but more specifically, I'd kind of like to ask you, kind of bring some of the technology into this discussion now, and talk about how municipalities are leveraging this new and coming future technology for the betterment of transportation, and maybe talk to some of the pilots that the Durham region has taken on.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Pleased to share. I think a lot of the comments that the other panelists have made already are spot on, and having worked at the provincial level, trying to think through what a framework for this technology looks like to cover all potential uses in all locations, interacting with all infrastructure. It is overwhelming. It's overwhelming at that level. So you can imagine at the municipal level, where I completely agree, there's not big R&D budgets that can be leveraged to support the scaling up of the technologies. It's a daunting challenge. What I like about the work we're doing now at Durham Region Transit, it is a more focused look at the technology. So the opportunity to identify, define, test out specific use cases where we're leveraging the technology to a specific outcome. And I think a lot of times, we get focused with just the deployment of the technology and lose sight of perhaps what we're trying to achieve from the technology. And I think that needs to stay front and center. And as a public transit entity, we want to ensure the technology is being leveraged to reinforce transit as the most efficient means of moving the large numbers of people through our transportation network. And so, you think through, we need to test out the technology. We also need to think through some of the policy and regulatory considerations that need to be put in place to again, reinforce those travel choices that offer maximum public benefit when it comes to things like congestion management and sustainability and so on. So we've got a couple of things that are underway, and a couple other things that we're exploring right now. The first I'll mention is a pilot of an autonomous shuttle that we're looking at in kind of a first mile, last mile scenario, operating on a 6-kilometer loop out of Whitby Station in the south area of Whitby down to the waterfront and back. We're doing that in partnership with the town of Whitby, Metrolinx, and SmartCone Technologies. I think Jason Lee probably touched on the project in the previous presentation. So we're excited to see that. It's an opportunity for us to assess whether there's, as I say, a use case and a business case to deploy these types of technologies in some of our lower demand areas that aren't suited to full-size conventional bus service. So it's a way we can reach into, particularly, think of suburban areas, lower densities that aren't as suited to supporting transit ridership, where you can extend the reach of transit into those areas and connect people back into your broader network of services. And in that way, we can redeploy our buses into our higher volume corridors, increasing the intensity or the frequency and span of service along those corridors. So, it's really a very specific, focused use case, and we're insurance issues were touched on as well by Scott, and certainly that's an issue that we confront as a municipality, and the level of risk that can be assumed when you're testing these new technologies. So safety is front and center, and we're pleased with SmartCone and the deployment of their smart infrastructure system, providing an added layer of safety, offering advanced visual and audio alerts to other road users along the route that can ensure everybody's aware of the vehicle operating in the area. The other key area where we're looking to leverage the technology is more on the connected side, and there may be even more potential there with connected technologies in supporting increased reliability of transit service. So we've been working with our traffic engineers and Fortran to test out an AVEN-funded project for transit signal technology. Connected systems that they'll hold the light for the bus as it approaches, improving reliability of the service, reducing travel times, improving fuel efficiency, and other related operating savings that go with that. So those are a couple of exciting projects, and then we're also engaged with a company called eCamion, funded through AVEN to test out other electric fast charging electric bus systems that we're excited as well. As I say, ultimately our vision is, whether it's through the expanded DRT on-demand micro transit service that we launched this past year, whether it's through autonomous shuttles that can help collect people closer to where they live, connect them into a fleet of zero-emission, high-frequency electrified transit service. That's ultimately where we're looking to get to, and some of these activities are our first step along that progress.
Thank you, Jamie. I want to. We are quickly running out of time on this panel, unfortunately, with so many interesting pieces of conversation yet to be brought out. But I don't want to ignore the audience. So we've got an audience question here, I think, for you, Jamie, and perhaps for you, Michael. Is there a legal clarity yet on status or ownership of data from infrastructure sensors? What does it mean to a municipality to have rich data, like a product such as smart cone delivers? And I just want to comment, add on to that audience question, Jamie. In terms of infrastructure, I know the Fortran project has been very lean in terms of infrastructure. It's basically an iPad and a bus, which is great. On the smart cone piece, though, you do get into more infrastructure costs, and maybe talk to the legality, the data question, and then also what are the added benefits to that infrastructure in the smart cone project. And then, Michael, I'll pass it off to you to kind of carry on the thought there, if you don't mind.
So let me jump in. The short answer is not a chance. Is there any clarity around this? And one of the things is, Scott talked about 430 members of AMO. Good for them, because there's only 444 municipalities in Ontario, but they range in size from the tiniest of them to Toronto. And on the smallest of them, the issue of contractual arrangements are likely to be dictated by suppliers. On the largest of them, there's going to be a more equal bargaining power in the discussions around contracts. But there's no legislation that deals with this. There's unlikely to be legislation that deals with any of this, and it's all going to be contract driven. And so, if there's 444 municipalities in Ontario, there's likely to be at least a couple hundred different models of how this is going to work, because it's going to be private.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
I was going to say, I can answer the big answer to what this is. I can say on our specific project, all partners, the project agreement is key in setting out what the expectations are around the sharing of that data and who has access to it. And certainly that's the key information from these types of tests is, you imagine the interest across the various partners in accessing that data, because that's part of what we're trying to assess. The whole purpose is to evaluate and to determine whether there is a broader use case. So that's a key part of the partnership agreements that are being entered into between the various parties. The bigger question is a key one that I think we are going to have to grapple with. We talked about the transit signal priority systems. We're excited to look at opportunities to expand its use across our network within Durham Region. But we do have services that do cross municipal boundaries into other jurisdictions as well. So, I mean, we have one of our highest volume corridors also serves or does pickups and drop-offs within the city of Toronto as well. You know, eventually we'd like to deploy this type of system along that corridor. To be able to use it in Toronto will require us to, you know, enter into arrangements to have, say, our vehicles communicating with their traffic signals. And so there are questions of data rights and access considerations that will need to be sorted out. And that is going to be, and I think we acknowledge here, one of the key steps in that municipal preparedness that's going to need to come. And that interoperability across what are essentially invisible boundaries that we travel across on transit for goods movement purposes every day is part of that equation, certainly. Within Durham Region, we have 8 local municipalities, as well as the region, as well as the province that operate roads. So, as I say, interoperability of infrastructure and technology that's deployed across the various authorities is going to be critical.
Thank you, Jim. I think you've hit on a key question there, and I think that's with the remaining time we have, I think this is the question that we all need to jump in on here is the interoperability of the systems. And I think both Scott, Michael, and Bern have valuable input on this piece of conversation. So I'll open it up and say, who would like to jump in first?
Oh, I was just going to say, when we look at transportation, when we look at horizontal coordination between municipalities when it comes to transportation, we have difficulty with things like snow removal. That is a decidedly more straightforward process than data standards and APIs and sharing agreements and whatever else may be attached to this idea. There is, to the point Michael raised, 444 municipalities. The last question that was put to us was the second half of that question was what's the value of this data potentially to municipalities? It's considerable, but the reality is very few of them actually have the resources to be able to harness this data, to be able to analyze the data, and to be able to draw or extrapolate knowledge from the data, and that's a lost opportunity. The success of the transportation system as it works now, to Jamie's point, is that those boundaries that exist are invisible. If you're driving along the road, it's, you know, there's standards there that allow for continuity between jurisdictions. The road doesn't fundamentally alter on the 401 as you pass through municipalities or a provincial highway, or even, you know, if you travel along the length of Bloor Street. And that same, there's an absence of that same approach here. And I think the risk that we see is this sort of balkanized approach to how we actually manage these innovations in a way that allows for collective good to be harnessed from.
Thanks, Scott. I don't know if Bern or Michael would like to jump in. I know each of you have some valuable insight on this interoperability question.
So it's going to take senior levels of government, the province and the federal government, to assist in dealing with this. So at the federal level, I'll use the example of anti-idling bylaws. The anti-idling bylaws that exist largely across the country were a product of a model originally developed by the feds. Now, they sent this out into the municipal ether, and municipalities took that and they customized it. And so there are no two municipalities that are identical in how they deal with idling. But they're similar. I think some element of that is going to have to be dealt with by the feds, or at least by the province. And I also think that to a certain extent, there's going to have to be imposed standards by the provinces, because, you know, the GTA is a perfect example. As Scott's observed, you travel from one municipality to another seamlessly. That vehicle's got to work the same. That vehicle's got to work the same from one municipality to the next. It's not as pronounced a problem in much of the rest of the province, because when the Harris government imposed amalgamation and the Ottawa area, for example, collapsed from 11 municipalities to 1, there actually is now rural land that lies between the outskirts of Ottawa and other municipalities. But it's going to have to get standardized, or we are going to end up with a balkanized system, some of it dictated by the suppliers and some of it dictated by larger municipalities, and some combination in between. So it's going to take it's going to take senior levels of government to deal with this. I mean, but in other areas, so for example, Amazon a few years ago was awarded a US patent for an airborne distribution center that would hover at 45,000 feet and use UAVs to make deliveries within minutes. Except UAVs at the moment can't be flown higher than 90 meters above ground, and may not be flown closer than 75 meters from people, animals, building structures, or vehicles. Well, the feds are going to have to deal with that as well, because not all of these automated systems are land-based. We can't wait for the municipalities to deal with it.
Yeah, so thank you for that insight, Michael. I'm going to cut it off there, and I'm going to thank you for the Amazon example. I think it's a very interesting one, and that unfortunately we don't have time to flesh out. But in our conversation around Amazon and mobile manufacturing facilities as well is another very interesting example. But I want to get give Bern a chance to jump in here, because he's done some very deep dive on this interoperability question, specifically around ISO 4448. So Bern, I want to give you a chance to talk about, not just from a policy perspective, but also perhaps from a technology or a platform perspective, how we tackle the interoperability question.
Yeah, there's actually a second half to interoperability. The geographic interoperability from municipality, absolutely critical. But it's also the case that when you're going to operate fleets together, different fleets. So for example, I'll just pick UPS and FedEx are going to operate in the same city. They're going to use the same loading areas. They may even interoperate with Uber, sharing loading areas with passengers, but let's just pick those two companies. They have to interoperate. They're going to interoperate via a V2X system, but there absolutely has to be interoperation. Otherwise, those companies couldn't reserve and couldn't plan their logistics for their deliveries. So there's a whole second level of interoperability. In other words, automation is not going to work full stop without interoperation. And you also want it, when FedEx goes to the next city, when they go from Toronto to Montreal, they still want to be able to operate in a very similar way. They don't want to have like a whole new Montreal-based loading and unloading system to be different from the one that they're using in Vancouver. They want to use the same one. So we have to interoperate across the continent, not just across the province.
Well, Quebec is a distinct society. So let's always bear that in mind.
Who is?
Quebec.
All right, we'll just stick with every. You understand my point. Is that you have to have interoperability to physically work the system, and you need interoperability to politically work the system. So the technology is going to force interoperability, or we don't get to use this. This last 15 years of automated everything is a complete waste of time unless we crack this interoperability problem. It's a bigger problem. And Scott, you've been dealing with it for what? 100? You told us 127 years.
Not personally.
It's now or never. Well, I didn't think you were that old, but it's now or never.
So we can have a great system in place that solves the interoperability question. Let's look hypothetically. Who's managing that system? Who owns that system?
Unresolved. Who is going to operate any V2X system? Like, you can't have FedEx operate their own privately. It has to be operated in a shared way. So all of the goods and all of the passenger movement and the transit has to be able to intercommunicate. Otherwise, how can an automated bus know when it can stop if some automated truck is sitting in the spot? So it all has to work together. This is all unexplored.
So what about air traffic control? Is that an example that we can look to?
Well, I use the analogy ground traffic control. I use the analogy air traffic control, but the sidewalk is harder. The sidewalk is way harder, but the curb, just the curb for trucks and cars, that's harder than an airport. It's not as dangerous as an airport crash, an airplane crash. However, we need to look to air traffic control as a model for a system for ground traffic control. So the analogy is good, except that the sidewalk is much harder.
And Scott, I think I cut you off there. Did you have?
Yeah, well, no, I was just going to say, Michael pointed to other orders of government, the province or the feds, as being perhaps the balm to soothe some of these wounds. But I'm quite skeptical when it comes to data, and I've used this example countless times. The province currently allows us to, if we take one very rudimentary data standard, there are 4 acceptable widths with the government of Ontario for managing the width of a road. And the delta between the widest of those widths and the narrowest of those widths, when aggregated out over 305,000 center lane kilometers of municipal roads, is enormous. That is a one-dimensional measurement. This is not the IT revolution that we're talking about here. This is like point A to point B, and it's an indication. I mean, it's somewhat silly, but it's an indication of the, I think, approach that government has had to these sort of IT problems more broadly, in the sense they're not looking to actually provide prescriptions. And certainly at the local level, they're not looking to provide prescriptions. And frankly, I don't think you want them providing prescriptions. In many ways, I think the air traffic control is an interesting example. The internet's the other one. This was resolved, and patches have been put in place that allow the internet to largely function in a universal sort of way. But boy, if you're looking to local governments to fix these problems for you, to provide you with direction, or make you all play nicely together in the sandbox, to Vern's point, you've wasted a lot of time.
Exactly.
I will.
Go ahead, Jimmy.
Sorry, Dan, I was just add quickly. It may not be a direct active administration or whatever it is that manages this. There will likely need to be new pricing tools, I will say, that come into play at some point. We know as transportation electrifies, fuel taxes are not going to be able to obviously be at the level they're at today and support the level of infrastructure investment that's needed across our municipalities. So new pricing mechanisms that perhaps consider vehicle kilometers traveled and vehicle occupancy may be needed in order to ensure that our network continues to function as efficiently as it can.
And the robo-taxis as well. So the sidewalk robots have to be priced as well. Those are commercial vehicles on public space. They will have to be priced.
All right, we've got 1 minute left here. I've got one question I'll throw at whoever wants to answer it. We can see that the adoption of CAV technologies is already a global race with very large economic implications, as well as potential benefits in safety and the environment, to name a few. Isn't the real issue getting regulators, legal, insurance, and other stakeholders at the table now to work on this now? We saw huge government and regulatory changes in response to COVID, and CAVs may be the technical equivalent. And I'll add on to that question. How can Ontario be a leader in this space? And we've got 1 minute left. Who would like to tackle that? I'll also invite you all to say a few closing remarks, very brief.
Yeah. Well, you know what? It is absolutely critical. The operations, the regulations are 100 times more complex than technology. I know that's shocking for anybody working in AI and deep learning and so on. The technology is not the holdup here. I understand we're not done with technology, but it's the regulations. The worst thing that could ever possibly happen to us is that we hit our dream of a cheap level 5 vehicle without any of these other issues sorted out, because we're going to end up in a mess far greater than the one we have now. So it's really all these other issues that are most important. And how the province can do that is focus on deployment systems and on regulatory innovations, and you know, somewhat less so on the technology itself, and much more on the deployment and operations.
Thank you, Bert. Michael, any closing remarks?
Yeah, sure. I mean, listen, I said at the outset that we started looking at this 5 years ago. There's been no advance in those 5 years. I've spoken to conferences involving senior levels of government and municipalities. At the end of the day, the only way this is going to work is if the manufacturers and suppliers end up with sitting down with Ontario and with the feds and say, guys, this isn't going to work unless you help us. Anyway, thank you, Dan, for involving me in this. It's been fun. You know, hopefully
thank you, Michael.
Talk a
Jamie,
little
on
longer
to
next time.
Yeah, you know, I think I touched on it before that, you know, it can't just be about deployment for the sake of deployment. We need to be leveraging the technologies to achieve a public benefit. And so, you know, municipalities have an important role to play in that. You know, I say on the transit side, we can either pretend this isn't happening, close our eyes and our ears and hope it goes away. But it's not going to happen. We know the technology is coming, perhaps not as quickly as initially expected. And we need to be thinking about how we can leverage it to better connect people into transit and to supplement our system. And that's you know, that's what's key. And I think it's important, you know, as other municipalities consider their first steps, to look to other use cases that have been tested or deployed already, and see if they can take the next step, so we can move this along and do so in an orderly way. Otherwise, as Bern was talking to, we risk just kind of throwing it all out there and letting it sort itself out, and that rarely works out to the or achieves the public benefit that we want.
Thank you, Jamie. And Scott, just a brief.
Yeah, quickly. So Good Roads actually began as a social justice movement in the 1870s in the Northwest United States. And at that time, it was a response to a new innovative transportation technology called bicycles, which led to all sorts of social chaos as they were popular. It became more popular. Same thing was replicated when Henry Ford popularized or made cheap internal combustion engines. It takes a long time. There's some lag in there between the willingness of society to embrace these innovations and the ability of government to keep pace with the dynamics that they impose on society. I think that probably offers a lesson moving forward. It would be somewhat foolish to replicate those mistakes from that long ago. We do have examples that indicate it is possible. You know, I think it'll be interesting to see how this unfolds in the next little while. For a long time now, we've been told and sold on the promise of this, and we haven't seen much in the way of delivery so far.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you very much. We are woefully over time. I just want to say that great job, guys. We could have, I think, filled a 2-hour panel discussion here. That speaks very highly to the organizers of this event and this panel in terms of who they've invited in. Great talk, lively discussion. Thank you for providing your generously offering your time here today. I'd like to thank the audience for their participation and viewership of this event. And now I'd like to pass it back to Justin.
Great, thanks, Dan. Thanks so much for moderating the panel. And I also specifically want to thank Jamie, Bern, Scott, and Michael for their insights and contributions to the panel. They've they've provided a lot of information to the audience today, but they've been working in the background with all of us, Dan, as you know, sharing their insights, helping us with partners as we try to bring their technologies to market. So thank you to all of them, and great job to the panel and to you, Dan, in particular. Thank you. So with that wrapped up, we're kind of at the point now where we're going to close out the day. And once again, I want to share with you that the event was presented to you today by the Innovation Factory Center for Integrated Transport and Mobility in Hamilton, Ontario Tech University, Spark Center, Durham College, and of course the Autonomous Vehicle Innovation Network. And in addition to me wanting to thank everyone and thanking the audience for their participation today, I also want to bring up Richard Dunda from the Innovation Factory, along with Chris Gillis, to join me here for a few closing remarks. So over to you, Richard.
Thanks, Justin. Can you hear me?
Yes,
we can. Okay, great. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who's attended. This was not our first at CITM. It wasn't our first virtual conference, but it was our first virtual conference using this platform jointly with Durham. And the coordination between the two teams was pretty phenomenal. I know Justin, Chris, and I got led gently by hand through the process on how the process worked. There were over 450 people registered for this from several countries, which from its previously physical implementation, that's pretty interesting, and it'll make us consider what to do in the future with this conference. I also want to thank all the panelists and the speakers. They did a tremendous job. There was some pretty topical stuff in this conference, from legal issues to technology deployment issues and challenges to the state of CAV technology. And I'm reminded of the one slide that Corey Clothier showed with the Gantt chart of companies that are deploying technology in this space, and I thought I knew them all, and it was pretty mind-boggling. So thank you to everyone who helped put this on, and again to everyone in the audience and the panelists. And if you're interested, CITM.ca. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Over to you, Chris.
Thanks, Justin. And I just, I'll echo everything both of you have said today. I think, Justin, you really pointed to our crew, or part of the team that people haven't seen, and what a strong team we really had to put this together. This is a phenomenal job. I think everyone's done a great job. I would like to also just thank Sherry Colbert, too, our other part of the Durham RTDS. Sherry and Joel couldn't be here throughout the event, but Spark ran the platform, and that was just really, really brilliant. I guess maybe just also adding on to again thank the province of Ontario and AVEN. I think our ministries of economic development, job creation and trade, and MTO were the seed of AVEN. And to me, this is just another example of how that seed is starting to grow, and really we're starting to see a lot of phenomenal collaborations come out of all of this, and I just want to echo both of your comments about the quality of the speakers. Really, from my point of view, from the opening day one all the way through to today, just the quality of content. And I know in the networking sessions I really saw that, and I thought Dan did a great job, and just to round up this panel today was, I think, a great way to end this. A lot of really nitty-gritty issues came out there, and it just says this stuff really has to get out of the table and be addressed. So anyway, just really thanks to both of you and our team. Just really happy to be part of all this, and really excited to see where we're going to take this going forward. So Justin, back to you.
Great, thanks, Chris, and thanks once again, Richard. It's been a real pleasure being part of this event and hosting today, and getting to sort of reconnect with everyone that was either speaking or on a panel. But I do want to give everyone an opportunity to network. And so before I go there, I just did want to reiterate that these sessions over the last few days have all been recorded and are available for everyone to take a look at again through the website in different social media channels. So please do check that out if you missed some sessions or you want to replay them to take down some more notes. But now it's time to give you guys an opportunity to finish hearing from us and start hearing from each other. So we're going to move over to the networking or the virtual networking part of the discussion. If you want to take part, please click on the left-hand side of your screen where it says networking. So on my screen, it's the bottom leftmost choice, I guess, and click on that. And Hopin will pair you with someone at random, and you will have 3 minutes to network, and with an option to extend the session if you would like. And then again, you can click connect if you'd like to virtually exchange business cards.